Hello everybody, this is the person masquerading as Grin Spickett. Welcome to episode 1 of RV TV Extreme. Our topic today is what's an ideogram. This is a completely unpracticed dissertation here. Bear with me, I'm a little lonely and that's why I am speaking to myself. So, what's an ideogram? Well, ideogram comes back to when Ingo Swann was at SRI and they were looking at the process of remote viewing, and Ingo noticed that people seemed to, maybe in anticipation of working on a target, make a little twitch or maybe a little mark on the page. That's the lore that I'm going with, okay? And then he wondered, or they wondered, what information might be contained in this. And so over time, the insight developed that maybe when you take the target numbers like 1, 4, 1, 2, you immediately make a squiggle. And that squiggle is sort of your first contact. You're distracted by writing out the target numbers and listening to them, and that allows your subconscious mind to give more input over your body and give you something that hopefully represents the target in some essential pure manner, and that might be a good starting point for your remote viewing session. In writing the ideogram, Ingo recommended to pay attention to the motion feeling. This is almost like a German word, it's a compound word. Motion feeling, sorry, tolerate my bad handwriting there. Motion feeling, in German, I don't know what that would be, but the idea is it's both emotion and feeling in combination, not really in isolation. So that motion feeling is what many of the controlled remote viewing methods look for first after completing the ideogram. The motion feeling is sometimes written out as a description like down, wavy, in, hard, down, wavy, in, hard. Does that relate to what I drew? Sort of down, wavy, in, hard. Does this look like in to you? Well, that's a trick question because it's not about what it looks like, it's about the motion feeling. And so a really key insight here, both from Tom McNear and from Paul H. Smith, is that although the line on the page or the blackboard here is going a certain way, you don't necessarily look at this and say this is literally a representation of the target. You pay attention to the motion feeling, and although you're working in 2D, your impression of the target might be in 3D, and so you may have an impression of going in. Similarly, you might have an impression of hard, and there was no real hardness experienced on the writing surface. The hardness is some impression in your mind, either a literal feeling, maybe in your fingertips, or some other part of your body, or just a thought that comes to mind. It's hard to express because these feelings that come to mind can be a little bit like a half-remembered dream or a word on the tip of your tongue, and you aren't necessarily actively producing them, but rather, and in my opinion, they're arising in consciousness if they're not directly experienced by the body. So this motion feeling is really a key ingredient to starting your session off on the right foot for many people. Is the ideogram 100% necessary? No. Are there lots of different ways to do an ideogram? Yes. There's a little bit of a controversy about ideograms. First of all, they don't have to be done on a page. An ideogram could be done in your mind as well. You can imagine, instead of letting your hand and your writing implement go, you could sort of replicate inside your mind, and some methods have attempted to do this. There's also a question about, are there universal ideograms? And some of the methods say yes. And there's a divide, about people who say an ideogram that looks like this is always going to be liquid or water. This is always land. And there's a thought that you could drill ideograms, and you drill them and drill them and drill them to teach your mind what these things mean, so that when you're given a target number and you come out with this, that it's going to mean something specific to you, because that's what you've programmed your mind to do through repeated drilling. That divide, on one side of the divide might be, I'm not sure if this is still the case, but the scientific remote viewing crowd, Lynn Buchanan's CRV, let's call that CRVL. And then over on this side might be Paul H. Smith's CRV, we'll call that CRVP, and both of them will be mad because they'll both say that actually it's Ingo's CRV. But in Paul H. Smith's side here, every time you draw the ideogram, you're paying attention for the motion feeling, and you're getting a new impression from it, and you do not go by what it looks like. What it looks like really doesn't matter. It's the insight you get while getting the motion feeling that matters. Or on this side, the idea is if this is pretty much always flat land, flat land, flat land, because that's what you've drilled yourself to do. And then there's an in-between, okay? There's an in-between that says, over time, I'm going to learn new ideograms, and these will tend to represent something similar to me when I look at them. And other remote viewers have a kind of a blended where, maybe 90% of the time this is going to mean something like liquid, but there is that odd time where it means instead a rope, okay? And it's paying attention to that motion feeling and the impressions that guide the viewer to decide whether it's going to be the 90% of the time or the 10% of the time. But really, if someone's drawing an ideogram and they don't know what it is, then the idea is take the coordinates again and draw it again, instead of sitting and puzzling and trying to figure out what it is. In some methods also, they'll use a technique called probing, which might be taking a writing implement and kind of poking into it and saying, oh, that's hard. That's a terrible H there. That's hard. I probed it. In some other versions, they might say run your offhand alongside the ideogram and then describe the motion feeling. And then my idea of Paul H. Smith's method is that the motion feeling is what you're paying attention for when executing the ideogram. So I hope this helps you understand a little bit what the ideogram is, why it's used. I think it can be incredibly useful. There are times where I'm very tempted to interpret it based on looks alone, especially when I didn't get a very strong motion feeling. And there are some times when, in retrospect, after doing a session, the ideogram matches some element of the photo feedback, quite strongly, but it's nothing that I would really know what it is at the moment that I did it. And an example of that might be, for example, sorry for the rough cut, my phone ran out of tape, I guess. It said no more space. Weird. Here's another continuation. Let's say I took the ideogram from the target coordinates 3 times, and I have a feeling that this one is man-made, hard, and straight, and I have a feeling that this is warm and bright and man-made, and that this is also man-made, firm and long. Now those wouldn't be impressions I'd get at first, but they're impressions that might come. I don't know how they arrange together, but then later on I find out that the target photo, it has sort of like a long perspective of a building, another long perspective of a building, and then a prominent street light. Later I can see that these ideograms kind of corresponded and maybe even look like the physical object in the photo, but at the time my job is not to guess what they are, but it is to describe the motion feeling, and then later in the process describe the other impressions that come with it, such as maybe in this case warm, okay, or energetic. So that's the ideogram and the very first part, the motion feeling. This is a cornerstone of many of the methods that descend from controlled remote viewing. And if you understand that, then when you're reading through the different manuals and the different techniques, you'll be able to find the differences in those approaches. I hope you find it helpful, and please let me know if you'd like to see more. Take care.